Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for the Gubernatorial Talk Story for the CNHA Convention. I have Vicki Cayetano here with us today. My name is Rolina Fa'agai. I'm a policy analyst for the SHA. And why don't we have Vicki tell us a little bit about herself?
Thank you. Well, I think one of the things you said you wanted to find out was why am I running for governor of the state? And I would just say that I believe Hawaii's never been at a more critical juncture than we are at right now. You know, with COVID, it really brought out all the problems that we have in our state, many of which we have talked about but not dealt with. But I do believe it also comes with opportunities. And that's been my whole life, which is as a business owner, looking for opportunities, bringing people together, and producing an outcome that benefits everyone. I'm not a politician. I'm a business owner, a wife, a mother and grandmother. And I really believe Hawaii can be so much more with the right kind of leadership.
Perfect. We'll just dive right into the questions. Tell us a little bit about your career, expand a little on it as an executive, and what experiences you feel qualify you to lead the state of Hawaii, and how these career experiences have prepared you for the role.
Thank you. Well, I started 34 years ago, a laundry, just started a commercial laundry for hospitals, but I always looked for opportunities and saw Waikiki and all the hospitality there. And I thought to myself, you know, why would anyone want to run a laundry on prime Waikiki real estate? So from there was the genesis of growing United Laundry to the company that it is today, with 5 locations on 3 islands. And with it is I think what qualifies me is that it always takes a team to make things happen. You can talk about ideas, talk about vision, but the challenge is always in execution. And that's been my experience. My track record shows that that's what I've been doing. And so bringing an A-team together to do that and to motivate them and to reap the benefits for everyone to enjoy, that's at the heart of what our company has done over 34 years. And that's what brings me to this table here, is that kind of creative, innovative thinking, ability to bring people together, to articulate the vision, and then to move with decisiveness and urgency.
Awesome, thank you for that. As the governor of the state of Hawaii, you will be faced with making critical decisions that will impact the lives of over 1 million people. You did briefly talk about being expanded throughout the state. What will the decision-making process look like?
Well, I think that one of the most important things the governor does is the selection of the cabinet, the key people that surround the leader of this state. The cabinet for me is going to be a representation of people with great institutional knowledge, but also new ideas on how we can address the challenges that have been talked about, some for decades, but yet never resolved. Very committed to addressing and producing resolution to some of these long-term issues that still impact us today. The other thing I would say is understanding how it impacts people. Every decision I make as a business owner affects the employees, affects the customers. So that's my track record and experience that I've been doing. But I think to understand not only the lives of people today, but how it impacts for generations after. This long-term thinking, I think, is really critical in a leader, because when the train wreck is in front of you, it's too late already. We have to be able to see 10 steps out, the actions of what we do today, what they will reap for us in the future. And so that's the kind of thinking that I would have as a governor, is looking at it not only for the immediate of what we have to do, but also thinking that the decisions we make today, how it impacts our children and our grandchildren going forward.
Right, I like that you bring that up. And you talked about the team that you would be establishing as your cabinet. Tell us about a time in your life that you've faced some adversity and how it contributed to the person you are today.
Well, I have to say that when I first started in this business, it was very male dominated, and there was discrimination towards women. And one of the big challenges I faced was not knowing laundry. I was introduced to a gentleman who was a laundry consultant and an expert in this state. So when I met him, the first thing I went up to introduce myself, and the first thing he said to me was, "I've never worked for a woman in my life, and I'm not about to do so now." And I was like, whoa, okay, what planet did you come off of?
Right.
But you know, I said to him, you know, Mr. Ohata, I don't think that Mr. Tasaka expected you to work for me or for our company, but you know laundry, and we're needing your help. And you know, at the end of the day, he not only taught me everything about laundry, but we became so close and respected each other so much. I was with him when he passed away. So I think facing challenges and turning lemons into lemonade, that's been my life story. And not letting any obstacle deter you from doing what you need to do.
Awesome. I really like that. You kind of led right into the next question, so I'm choosing another one. Let's see, what does Hawaii do well that other places could learn from? Alternatively, what can Hawaii learn from other places?
I think what we have here is so unique from the indigenous people, and that is the spirit of aloha. And you know, this is what we must cherish in our community. And through all of our disagreements, we need to be able to discuss with civility. This is very key in my mind, because we are never all going to agree on one thing, no matter what that subject is. But we need to respect each other for our differences. And through all of that, we must be able to come together for the greater good and make decisions. So to me, what makes us unique is still that sense of aloha, respect, and civility towards each other. I can't help but think of Queen Liliuokalani, whose home we had the privilege of living in when my husband was governor. And you know, her life example to me really is what we need in leadership today, to persevere, but to respect one another, and to, you know, always express aloha through our decisions. And as far as what others can learn, so what we can learn from others, to me it would be more innovation. I think that's important. I think sometimes we have a subconscious opposition to change. And sometimes change is very necessary. It's a different world from what it was 10 years ago. And so we need to change. We need to look for these opportunities because they are there. And we need to optimize them. Especially, it's not just for us, but more for our young people. You know, I look at Hawaii and I see people leaving, the young people, and I think to myself, God, if the future of Hawaii is leaving our state, what kind of future can Hawaii hope to have? We need to bring our young people back. So I think that we need to be more innovative and creative in our outlook and learn from other places, whether the issue is about housing, new businesses. Look at the mainland. Look at Papa Makeke. See, new ideas like that to capture the times that we're in, and to turn lemons into lemonade. So I think that kind of outlook is really necessary in the world that we're in today.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. You know, we talked about leadership and experiences and everything like that. How would you say you handle stress and pressure? Has that molded you because of your experience?
Yes, I think that stress is very often, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stress, no question, but we need to understand it's also a frame of mind. And I think for me, that's where my faith really plays a big role. I just have confidence that as long as I do my very best, the outcome I must accept, because it's in the hands of someone who is so much bigger than me. And so I think that plays a big role to really help me to understand how much I can do and to have faith that the outcome will always be as it's meant to be.
Awesome. Thank you for that. You know, we've asked a lot of leadership questions and experience questions. Wanted to ask you about a local business that has closed that you miss and what made it a special place for you.
So there have been too many local businesses that have closed. When I think of, well, the one that's probably closed before you were even born is Arakawa's, which was out really a country store. But you know, when you went there, you always felt so welcomed, and people know you by name. One of the siblings is still alive, everyone else has passed on. But there are too many other stores. There's a pie store in Kailua that closed a couple months ago. I think that, you know, it's really important to emphasize supporting local businesses. I started out as a small business. I know the trials and tribulations that they go through. And one of the things I want to do too is really see government be more of a partnership to support businesses rather than seeing, like, you know, as an adversary, all the hoops we have to jump through. I think that's really key. But I think that, you know, I think on one of the things I said was put Amazon down today and shop to a small business. So whether it's a clothing store, you know, what I'm wearing today, or anything else, I think it's really important to support local business because they work really hard to support us.
So Vicki, you did talk about your time in the governor's mansion. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience there at Washington Place?
You know, it's really an unforgettable experience to be in the Queen's home. And while we were there, one of the things that we did was establish the Washington Place Foundation to have oversight of the Queen's home. The second thing we did was to move the future governors, into a new residence that we built with privately raised funds. And so it's on the grounds of Washington Place, but Washington Place itself now belongs to the people and it's open to everyone. And that's what was always our mission, to do that, because we felt that's what Queen Liliuokalani really would have wanted. And so now future governors from Governor Lingle on live in a home that's called Hale Kia'aina, and newly built, and it's 20 years now since that happened. But you know, I remember too, Washington Place, if you think about it, has been the longest continuously domiciled residence when we moved in, and it really was not meant for modern living. And I remember as we were trying to raise money, we had people coming over to talk to them about the history. And to share with you, one day we were entertaining the King of Western Samoa, and we were having this formal official dinner there. And all of a sudden the chandelier is like moving, and my son and his friends were having a little ball game upstairs, and I was like, he was like all of 12 years old. I said, that cannot be. This is the Queen's home. So I said to His Majesty, excuse me. And he was like, oh, what's that? I went upstairs and I said, you folks need to play outside. And they were like, yeah, but there's all the security. So I think that was really the understanding that that home is so special. It's Queen Liliuokalani's home. It's a home for the Hawaiian people to come and visit. And governors need to have their residence on campus, which makes a lot of sense, but in another place. And that's why we did that. And I think people, looking back, you know, people say that that was the right thing to do. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity to have lived there. I learned a lot from Jim Bartels, our curator, former curator at Iolani Palace. You're wearing the crown flower, which was the Queen's favorite flower. And so it's just really special, and that we must perpetuate her legacy forever. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It almost has a nostalgic feel because my great-grandmother was a docent actually at Washington Place, so we did go through, and as you're describing this, it made me think about all her experience that she had there as well.
I bet she had a lot of stories too.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you talked about your son. You did mention earlier about the job market and things here in Hawaii and how it's impacting our youth. Tell us about your children and your grandchildren. You mentioned that we're trying to keep people here, so if you could elaborate on that.
Well, I think it is very difficult. You know, Hawaii's become so unaffordable. We need to really take a step back and say, what are we doing about this? Because it cannot continue. We need to address this with urgency. I have 4 grandchildren, 2 children, and I desperately want my grandchildren, you know, to be able to live here if they so choose. And right now, that's not even something that they can dream about. And that's why I am determined to say we need to do this. We need to address this and make sure that our ohana can stay together. Because to me, that is what makes Hawaii so special. It's our ohana.
Right, absolutely. You know, we talked about experience that you had as an executive and family roles and things of that nature. What made you realize that you were the leader that you needed to be?
You know, I don't think there was a time where I said I'm a leader, but I think from a very young age, I do recall one of the things, and my siblings, you know, we have 9 of us in the family.
Ooh, 9. I'm one of 5, so I get it.
Okay, big family. And so when you have multiple children, you see all the different personalities. And my siblings say, ever since you were young, Vicki, you were always doing things to help people, directing the show. They told me I had a board. Even when I was 9 years old, I put up this board and I gave household assignments to every sibling. And they were like, Mom didn't tell you to do that, but you were the organizer, and you were also very fair in how you assigned the chores. So I think that to an extent, leaders can be developed, but to an extent too, it's kind of, you know, it's something you want to do. And I think at the heart of leadership is the word I call servant leadership. It's wanting to help people. It's wanting to make things better through our actions. It's that desire that to me exemplifies true leadership.
Right. I like that you talked about that. I'm the oldest of 5, so I'm like, when Mom's not here, I'm in charge. So that's kind of how I played with it. You know, when we talk about the Hawaiian community and history, you did talk about the Queen, and if you could use maybe another person or event in Hawaiian history that you would reference and explain how that might have impacted your life.
Well, for me, the Queen really inspires me, you know, because her leadership style, onipa'a, perseverance, sacrificing for others for the greater good. I think that's really important. And so that is what resonates in my heart, is her style. She gave of herself to make sure that others didn't have to be sacrificed. And that speaks a lot. And I think that's the kind of leadership we need today, where more people think about others and persevere. No matter what happens, we will survive and we will thrive. I have to tell you an interesting story my dad told me when I was growing up. He calls me in, I'm thinking this is going to be a motivational speech, and he says to me, Vicki, and he says, spoke to me in Chinese, and he said to me, you will succeed in spite of, not because of. And he continued on. He said, in spite of the fact that you're of color, you're a woman, and you are short. I was like, really inspirational. Thank you, Dad. But you know, those words resonated with me. And I said, that's right. I know that the world isn't going to be handed to me. In spite of these 3 issues, no matter what, we will still succeed together. And I believe that.
And being one of 9, I would imagine any motivational speaking or pep talks for the whole family inspired all of you.
Yes, well, but he always, I don't know, my sister is very talented. You see, she played the piano, so she was like the golden child. And my younger sister was cute. I was right in the middle. Okay. So, you know, I always say oldest children command respect, youngest demand, and the middle children have to earn the respect. So I was always kind of the worker bee.
Right?
Yeah.
And one of 9, I would imagine.
Yes, that was a big family.
So, you know, with Hawaii's role in history, what would the first sentence in your chapter in Hawaii's history book read?
Well, I wouldn't want to copy the Queen and say perseverance, but that really is what I believe in, because through everything in life, that is the thing to me that stands out between people who succeed and people who fail. Those who are willing to stick it out, commitment. I think of when you talk about who inspires me, I think of my grandmother. So my grandmother, we were from the Philippines. She lived there from China. And after World War II ended, okay, she was left with 10 children, and the youngest was only 2. And this is a country that was decimated during World War II.
Right.
And my grandfather passed away young from TB. And there she is with 10 children to raise. And on top of that, she had bound feet.
Oh.
They were the size of my hand. That's how small they were. So she came to live with us years later, telling me this story. And I asked her, you know, oh my gosh, how in the world did you survive? And she said to me, you know, I recognize I have very little time. I have 10 children who depend on me. And I will survive. And you know what? She not only enabled her 10 children to survive, she enabled them to thrive. That's the legacy she's given me, her granddaughter.
Right. Wow. That's very powerful, especially that's adversity. You know, we talked about adversity in the beginning,
about
but that is true adversity.
You know? So I think that would have to be it, that we will persevere. And we must always have hope and believe that we will come through this.
Thank you for that. Could you use, or what are 3 words that would describe you on your best day and 3 words on your worst day?
Well, I think on my best day, it would be calm, happy, and grateful. And I honestly think even on my worst day, it would be the same 3 words, because I always see the glass as half full, not half empty. So even on the bad day, I will look for something, just even something good. And from that, try to focus on that, you know. But those were the words I would use: calm, happy, and with a grateful heart.
Right. Yeah. So we asked a lot of questions already. A lighter question to ask: what is your go-to plate lunch order?
Well, you know, I'm a vegetarian.
Oh, I did not. Okay, tell me about that.
So I would have things like tempeh, tofu, salad. I love that kind of food, and I do it for 2 reasons. I've been a vegetarian for about 20 years now. I actually do it for 3 reasons. And people think it's for diet, but no, it's not that. I've always eaten kind of healthy. But one, environment, because obviously it really would change our print on life if we all became more vegetarian focused. Having said that, my brothers and my husband more than make up, as they are carnivores. And then the second thing is it's all about animal welfare as well. For me, that's a big issue. You know, we have many dogs at home. Some are foster, rescue. So animal welfare is a big thing in my life. And then the third thing is that I think overall it is a better diet too. So yeah, I enjoy that.
Nice.
So that's my plate lunch.
Oh, okay. You know, we talked a little bit about the Queen and others that had inspired you throughout your life. Which other leaders in history inspired you?
You know, it's interesting that I think there are not as many, but I think there have been a number of women leaders. Even recently, if you look at the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, you know, I think through a lot of challenges, I think, what was she, Chancellor for 18 years? And they're saying that she'll go down as Germany's best Chancellor. And again, it's just that steady, humble style of leadership, very quiet. You know, I see to an extent government like our laundry. It's an essential need, but it should be in the background, just making things better for people.
Right.
And so I think leaders who show that kind of servant leadership, but get things done. Don't just do the talk. Show me the results. This is what I look for. It's what we do, right? In the private sector, in the nonprofit. We look for leadership that doesn't talk about it, but can go out and get it done. Can bring people together, identify your A-team. We all know you don't get to Super Bowl with just a great quarterback. You've got to bring everyone together. And so I think it's a leader needs to identify talent and good people to surround herself or himself with. So, you know, that would be my style of leadership.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. You know, we talked about a lot of things with experience, leadership, and all the heavier topics. What do you like to do to relax, unwind, and recharge?
I love that question. Well, I have a lot of interests. Music among them. I come from a musical family. I love that the symphony is back, both the youth and the Hawaii Symphony. I'm a big animal lover, so support a number of animal organizations. So playing with our dogs. We have 2 turtles as well, is my relaxation. Being with family. I've just learned to start cooking during COVID, so I'm actually a decent cook. and then, not many people know this, but I love washing cars.
Oh.
So I have a whole detail kit, and so that's what I do for relaxation. I love to wash cars. So bring your car up, and I'll wash it, tires and all, interior. I do the whole works.
And you talked about cooking. What is one of the dishes that you have attempted to or have become a domestic goddess about?
Well, I actually do a couple of exotic dishes like risotto, paella I like to make. And yes, even over Thanksgiving as a vegetarian, but I made turkey for the family and they really enjoyed it. So I find it very relaxing with the music, the animals surrounding me, a good workout, washing the car, and cooking a nice meal.
Right.
Great day.
Those are absolutely things that you look forward to, right? Spending time with family and really doing things that you want to do. Tell me more about your decision to run.
Well, I believe, you know, I'm not had a career in politics, but when I step back and see all the challenges our state is facing, and I have a great job, but you know, it's not just about me and not even just about me and my family. It's about the Hawaii we all love. And I feel compelled to give back. So I'm stepping up because I really want to lead the state to the kind of Hawaii that it can be, and it will be, you know. So that's why I decided to run with all the challenges we're facing. It's going to take a leader who really is going to have the sense of urgency, determination, and yes, onipa'a, perseverance.
Absolutely. I really just want to thank you for taking the time. I got to know you a little bit better on all of these things. I didn't know that you were a vegetarian, for one thing, and just all of your experiences, your family life, what you grew up in, and then also how you raised your children and your grandchildren. Really want to thank you for taking the time for the Gubernatorial Talk Story, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you again.
Velina ke aloha kākou a pauloa. He manawa maikaʻi ke ia no ko kākou hoʻomaikaʻi ana I nā pōmaikaʻi I loaʻa ia mākou a pauloa. E naʻe, he wā ke ia, he wā koʻikoʻi ke ia e kūkākūkā kamaʻi leo ai me ka poʻe moho no ka holo ana I ke kulana o ke kiaʻaina o Hawaiʻi nei. I'm very honored to be here representing the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement and of course the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs. I'm Hailama Farden, the President of the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs. Aloha nui kākou. Joining me today for some niele, some questions, is our current Lieutenant Governor, Dr. Josh Green. Aloha nui.
Aloha. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us some time today, and know that our Native Hawaiian audience is out watching you, and we have some, like I said, niele, some questions to ask you today, and I hope you don't mind. Some will be fun, some will be probably a little more serious. And
I love it all. I feel honored to get to spend time with you.
Thank you, thank you. Well, let's start with a fun one. What's your to-go plate lunch, please?
Oh boy, I would eat a plate lunch that's got hamburger steak and gravy and mac salad from pretty much anywhere. And you know, I grew up on the mainland and then came to Hawaii and lived on Big Island for a long time. So Zane's or I'm sorry, forgive me, Blaine's or anywhere in Hilo was always kind of a great thing, and get a strawberry float too. So nice. Not always health food, but That's the relaxation period of time.
And
Yeah.
there's balance that goes with that.
There it is, yeah,
Especially
jogging or...
from a doctor.
We try to preach balance, but it's been stressful times, you know, and so I don't begrudge anybody to go get some comfort food, and a bit of gravy and rice is good.
You mentioned you were on the continent. Where's Onehana? Where's your birthland?
So New York, I was born upstate New York in a little town called Kingston, and my parents were at Woodstock, the concert.
Oh.
So I have those roots. I was born in 1970, so I was in utero during the concert, and then we went to Pennsylvania. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and then my whole adult life has been here, mostly on Big Island, Ka'u, sometimes up in Hawaii, and now here on Oahu.
Wow. So we could say that our Lieutenant Governor has been to Woodstock.
I was at Woodstock, yes. I was at Woodstock, and it left not a small impression, I'm sure, on me.
May I ask what brought you to Hawaii?
Sure. It really was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I was with the National Health Corps. I trained as a physician and was wanting to give back, to do service as a profession in medicine. And there's this program called the National Health Service Corps where if you volunteer, the country, the federal government will send you somewhere where there aren't physicians or enough nurse practitioners. And against all odds, I got sent to Big Island and asked to serve there. So in 2000, I came to Big Island and became the doctor for 8,000 people in Ka'u for 4 years. And all of my patients were essentially Hawaiian or Filipino, almost all. And it was just the greatest way to be integrated into the culture because though I came from far away, I mean, it was a big change. I was immediately immersed as the family physician in Ka'u, in Na'alehu. And so changed my life in so many ways. But I stayed on Big Island. I still take call in the hospital. I did emergency room work also at Pahala Hospital and Kohala Hospital, where I'll actually be this weekend on call.
And what made Hawaii become your home?
Oh, so many things. So during the time being a doctor in Ka'u, one of the things I saw, especially in the emergency department, was people didn't have access sometimes to trauma services. A lot of that era, that time, we had great challenges with methamphetamine on the Big Island, and so I was seeing a lot of addiction. There was no treatment available practically. The trauma services were minimal. Behavioral health, like for people who were suffering mental illness, no services. And I kept seeing people over and over again, people that I had come to love as their doctor and kind of, you know, extended ohana, really. So I looked at the problems, I asked people how I could do more, and it came up, why don't you run for office if you'd like to work on other things? And I thought about it. I had already been transitioning to emergency medicine just on the weekends and nights, so I ran for office. And I actually didn't expect to get elected, honestly. I wanted to make the point that everyone deserved access to mental health care and drug treatment and good trauma services. I'd seen 2 one-year-olds severely injured when I was in the ER, and we didn't have enough services to help them. One lived, one didn't, and it's kind of heartbreaking. So I ran for office and then went door to door in my scrubs, as people often see me. You know, it's kind of more my normal life. And of all things, I ended up running against a guy who had kind of a sketchy past, and the people of Kona selected me to be their state representative. And then exactly 1 week after I got elected, I went over to Honolulu to find a team, and I saw this beautiful young woman, Jamie, my wife now, and I just fell in love with her. And before you know it, we started having, we got married, started having babies, and then your life is here. And I did subsequently run for Senate, thinking, okay, maybe I'll lose this time and just go on and be a doctor all full time. Didn't happen. Stayed 10 years in the Senate, and then people were real generous with me to let me become lieutenant governor. So all of those things happened maybe for a reason, I don't know. But when you meet a local girl from Kaneohe and you fall in love, and you start having babies, this is going to be your home forever.
How did she inspire you?
Well, she's so smart and so down to earth. We are very different in a lot of ways. So Jamie grounds me. She inspires me because Jamie's story, let me share it with you because I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about today. So today, I get to mahalo you for sharing my story with the Hawaiian community. So Jamie born here, grew up in Kaneohe, but her mom, who's Hawaiian, got sick when she was 9 years old, and she died of stomach cancer. When that happens, it happens too often in the Hawaiian community. That's one of the big challenges. We have incredible health disparities between our Hawaiian community and maybe the Japanese community or the Caucasian community. So people who are Hawaiian tend to live 10 years less because they don't have access historically to doctors or nurses or healthcare. Well, her mom at age 43 died of stomach cancer, and so Jamie was a tough young lady, and so she has two older brothers, Jared and Scott. She persevered, even though she was just 9 years old when she lost her mom. Her dad had a hard time dealing with it and kind of couldn't handle. So she was raised by these aunties, but because the church came and helped her. My wife is Mormon, I'm Jewish. It's kind of an interesting, weird mix, but we make it work, as you can imagine. She persevered and was a great student, and then some people came in and offered her a scholarship. She was at Epiphany, and then she went to Iolani, and she was one of the top students, and then they sent her from Iolani to Brown University, and then from Brown she came to UH and got a law degree, and so that was very inspirational to me, because you know the stories where a loved one dies and then the kids fall away or they don't succeed. One of her brothers fell on very hard times. He's great now, but he went through very tough times. That could happen to her too. So when I met Jamie, I was totally inspired by that. I mean, I fell in love with her like we all fall in love with people, right? But once I got to know her, she really embodies the story of what many of the Hawaiian people have gone through, which are struggles, but many times perseverance and success. And we don't hear those stories enough. But if I'm selected as governor, she'll be the first Hawaiian First Lady. And I think that's a special thing, because as we look at the great challenges, the Mauna Kea, and we look at the disparities in health, when we have a First Lady who can guide her physician, husband on some of these matters, I think it's going to be important. So I'm looking forward to introducing her to everyone, though I think she knows a bunch of you guys. But, that, and then she's raising these two beautiful children of ours. Again, a very wacky mix of Polish, Russian, Hawaiian, Japanese fusion, right? We got some Hapa kids, but they now reflect Hawaii. And so that is an inspiration to me.
I think that might be a great example of who we are as a people today, both mixes in many ways. So, yeah. So at the end of the day, you go home, your reflection time with your ohana, your family. How does that pan out for you, and how do you defrag?
Oh, well, we eat, and we walk together, and there's a lot right now. We've gone through a lot together as a state, as a people. Going through COVID was stressful. It was stressful on my family, my loved ones, because they saw the stresses and strains that were all across the state. And then there were people that were really traumatized by COVID, for example. And so there were even people that protested at our home. And so that affected my boy, Sammy, who's 11, and Maya, who's 14, and Jamie, but she was strong. But we go home and we do what everyone does. Like, if there's a football game, we're watching the football game. If there's time to go to Ala Moana, to walk, to go to the beach, we do that too. The kids are getting busy though, having a teenager and a preteen, and they're into all the usual stuff. We're hustling to get them around. I mean, we're very much like a regular family. I happen to be the lieutenant governor, but when I'm home, they're messing with me, and I'm just dad. And we're back to normal all the time, actually.
In my naivety, I would think that when you became a lieutenant governor, you'd have to surrender your other occupation.
Yes.
And one thing that I admired about you is I saw you continue to do your work. And not just because it's a job to go to, but because it was an important one in which people are being helped.
Thank you.
So your family has had to share you, not only as a doctor, but as our lieutenant governor. And I would say thank you to them too for sharing you. How is that going to change if you're elected governor?
Well, they've been great, because you're right. For the last, I've been in office for 17 years. I did 4 in the House and 10 in the Senate, and then 3 now plus as lieutenant governor. almost every weekend for the last 17 years, I've been on call. As Lieutenant Governor, I halved it down to just every other weekend. It's because I really care deeply about the people of Big Island, and there's a serious shortage of healthcare providers. But probably more importantly, it made me a much better Lieutenant Governor to be able to be with people in their moments of crisis, to have some normal experiences as opposed to the experiences maybe that just elected officials can have. But it's tough on them. They know I get up at 3 in the morning to go jogging on Saturdays, and I get that first plane and I'm gone for 48 hours. And I'm texting them and FaceTiming and all the usual stuff, but that was a lot of time separated. But they knew that I did it because the people of Big Island asked me to do it. We had to make compromises. When I was in the Senate and the House, I could do it when the session was out. It was easy and we could get more time. Lieutenant Governor has been more than a full-time experience, but going back and being in the ER or starting free clinics, that makes a really, hopefully a positive difference in people's lives, especially in the neighbor islands. When or if, I have no idea what will happen in the race, if I receive the honor of becoming governor, then I can't work any longer as a physician, except as a volunteer, and I'll do medical missions. Again, I do it from a spiritual place, but I don't do it for any denominations because we're a mixed family. With my mom was Russian Orthodox. My dad was Jewish. My family, extended family, is all Mormon, which is a really, a big mix. But I did medical missions with the Catholic Church at one point, the Nazarene Church, and doing that is very gratifying for physicians. We don't get to do that as much as we'd like to. So I'll be governor, but I could see us doing medical missions like we did to Samoa, where we vaccinated thousands and thousands of people, or even medical missions to the rural parts of our state where maybe people don't have access to a doctor or a nurse. So that's going to always be part of me. And as I've gone through public life, I've had more and more people kind of come to work with us on these things. When we had the Samoa experience and were asked to go there and vaccinate people, we thought, okay, how many people will actually do this if we just decide we're going to go as volunteers? So we reached out. I think we actually reached out to you guys and said, could you put out an ask to see who would volunteer? By the next morning, 485 nurses and doctors volunteered to travel with my team and I to Samoa to take care of people. So my philosophy of governing is motivate people, bring people along to do good for others. And it's incredible the generosity of the Hawaiian people and all of the residents of our state. I just can't believe how generous people are. And we'll do a lot more of that. It makes Hawaii even more extraordinary in other people's minds when they see that.
And I think with maybe any of the controversies that exist, whether it's with COVID-19 or anything else, I think the spirit of aloha, we count on it permeating. And I think that has carried our people, and which is shared by the people of the Pacific. I think one of the areas that tugged my heart, and I mentioned to you before we started chatting formally here, that you folks arrived at a home in Samoa, and this baby died just as you walked in. And it made me think about our kupuna, who were, I guess, unfortunately, victims of many plagues here, whether it's smallpox or measles or other sicknesses, even the flu, which seems so common today. And here we are again, 100 years after the Spanish flu, when our founder, Prince Kalanianaole, Prince Kuhio, as people know, continued his work. He got on the ship, got on the train, as I keep saying. He arrived in DC to do the work for his people. And in that developed what today we celebrate as Hawaiian Homes.
Yes. And
I continuously think about the demand on you as a person currently. And then I thought about, what about your family? And thinking, when you're exposed, you have to stay away from them. And they don't have daddy, or they have to talk to daddy on a phone or something like that. And I think those must be trying times for you.
They were and are. The pandemic, more than anything, was trying for us. I caught COVID in September of 2020 on my way to the hospital to do one of my shifts over Labor Day. We know that because I tested right before, and then one of my brothers that works with me caught it and got sick, and then I got tested. And so you do worry, because I was 50, I'm 51 now, 50 years old then, and you don't know. I had just lost a friend who was 51 years old, one of my college mates, healthy guy, he died. So you don't know what's going to happen. And I knew then that everyone was sharing that same fear. They put me in Sam's bedroom, this little bedroom with no TV, and stayed there for 14 days. And they had a little food cart, a princess food cart that we had from when my daughter was little, and they would kick that food cart down, it would roll down the thing, and I'd eat and wave at them. And but they didn't catch COVID because we had learned how to avoid spread. And then the vaccines came, and that made it a little easier. And then treatments came, and fewer people would die from COVID. And that's how science has to work, and that's how families have to work too. But it was an incredible time of sacrifice for all of Hawaii. So mine was just a small sliver of that experience. Everyone else was also living in fear. At least I was lucky enough to have the medical training, so I kind of knew what to expect. But you're still just a person too, and I saw a lot of my physician colleagues and nurse colleagues and respiratory therapists and firefighters. I mean, so many heroes during this pandemic because they would go off and work knowing that, yes, they can't come home for an extra 3 days or they're going to get positive. We all knew we would pretty much catch COVID when we were working in the field in 2020. When 2021 came and we started getting vaccinated, the fear dropped a little bit. But again, these folks who did great things for our state, they're also just people. And that's why I've been kind of celebrating them lately.
What has made you realize, it's time for me to step up and run for governor? I'm not going to assume that just because you're the lieutenant governor, you've decided I would be the appropriate candidate. But what really made you realize I should step up and run for governor?
It was during that era when we went to Samoa, honestly. That was about a year into being lieutenant governor, and I didn't know whether or not I was suited for even more leadership, because lieutenant governors usually don't get to do a lot, and I'm grateful to have had a role for these last couple of years, though the tragedy of COVID hurts because we've lost 1,000 loved ones. But when that challenge came and my team of Jamie and Brooke and all these wonderful people around me stepped up, we only had 3 days to plan that medical mission to go to Samoa and help 30,000 plus people. And we saw those children pass right in front of us. I knew then that we could create an environment that would care for others. And I knew that we could set an example, a real leadership example in Hawaii that would transcend a lot of the politics as usual, that would transcend a lot of the jabber that you hear about. We could actually do more. And I came back from that experience, which was only 2 days long, though we dove in and pulled out. And I just thought, okay, if you care enough about people, you should go for it. We need different kind of leadership. I'm not ever going to criticize the govs in the past. Different styles, different people. But this is an era where someone who's got health experience and who has had these large human experiences like I've had over the many years, from Ka'u through Samoa, through the pandemic, I think it has meant that I should try. And I put myself out there. I'm not shy about answering any question from you or friends. I want people to know that leadership has not got to be politicians. It could be anybody, but the experiences we've had are kind of unmatched. And I think if we get selected to be governor and serve, my whole family will really, I hope they will inspire, because these children I have are just wonderful, and they are a reflection of Hawaii. My wife, is a matriarch already, even though she's not very old. She's 43 years old, right? In fact, she's the age now that her mom was when she passed. But now it's a new generation, and that's when I figured out that I should at least ask people to let me lead. And it is an ask. There's nothing taken for granted, ever. But it has been 2 years of bonding with the entire state of Hawaii. That I will tell you has happened. I hear that all the time, that people feel like they know us because we're in their living room, or there's a need to, share one's mana'o about the experience of COVID, and that has put me in a space where I really get to get closer to people.
You mentioned quite a few I guess, points of adversity and struggle. Would you be able to highlight something that maybe was a challenge for you, that has strengthened you to prepare you not only for the LT role, but for the governor's role? And it could be something you've already mentioned, or maybe something from way far in your past.
Sure. Well, without a doubt, the experience with COVID was a challenge, but it was a challenge for all. There's actually something that maybe, even though we've been together over the years at the council, maybe people don't know. So when I was born, I didn't, develop properly. I wasn't communicating, and my parents, I was the first child, first-time parents, they didn't know what was going on, and they were afraid, and so they reached out, and at the time, the consensus amongst healthcare professionals was that I had extreme developmental delay, or what we always have described historically as like mental retardation. I did not mature at all or develop, and they found out I was deaf, actually.
Yeah.
So they discovered I was deaf when I was about 20 months old, and the problem, I was one of the lucky ones, was that I had incomplete development of my ear canals on both sides. So I had this developmental problem, and through surgeries, I was able to get my hearing restored by the time I was, a little over 2 years old. And then it took a lot of time, because if you don't hear for the first 2 years of life, all kinds of milestones get passed. You don't learn to speak. You don't. You're not able to process information the same way, and it takes an incredible lift from the community. We're using the word kahale a lot now here as we work on things together in Hawaii, but our village then had to wrap their arms around me and get me into education early, and it took a lot for me to catch up. And so I always feel so grateful that those two doctors, the family doctors that I was with, that my parents took me to and discovered that I was deaf, they put me back on track to have a life. I would have otherwise never had a life. They were going to, the old way was to put someone in like an institution, because you didn't see any development, didn't respond to anything. So I feel lucky every day that I got a second chance. And so a lot of the things that I've worked on as a senator or as lieutenant governor have to do with that, like getting kids with autism coverage, getting screening for all of our children in the state, because I know how many kids will suffer if we don't do those things. But that was a big challenge, to be deaf at a young age. There are other people who have suffered and struggled much more. Not everyone's lucky enough to get their hearing back or their sight. So that was another reason I went towards medicine. I never expected to be lieutenant governor. I always expected to be a physician once I started doing well in school and had all that support. That came naturally to me. I already told you how I kind of accidentally became a representative and senator, but being deaf was was the hurdle in my life that by getting over it, I had new chances.
3 words that define your character. Just words, 3 words. Can be 3 separate character items.
Say intense, caring, and passionate, I would say.
Nice. Can you briefly pick one Native Hawaiian leader, and perhaps one that's not a Native Hawaiian leader, that you admire or you see as perhaps a mentor? It could be alive or not today.
Okay, let's see. So the politician guy in me, I have this kind of romanticized affection for Kennedy or maybe for Gandhi, because Gandhi was, they both were involved in peace movements. Those were big symbols for my political life, and I like how they tried to bring people together. But for a Hawaii leader, maybe this may be a little bit of an odd one maybe, but like Father Damien. Because, what Father Damien did, and he didn't have a long life. Father Damien only lived like 45 years, but the sacrifices that he made to go and care for, what people don't realize is Father Damien was sick already. He had tuberculosis when he was younger. And when he went to Kalaupapa to be part, religious figure, part doctor, part caregiver, he cared for people with Hansen's disease, leprosy, and caught it himself and committed his whole life. So that is a very rare circumstance. And of course, he's since become a saint, basically, right? So it's extraordinary to see that happen. But that experience is one of the most extraordinary stories I've ever heard.
Self-sacrifice
and complete
service.
in every way. He sacrificed his entire life to save others, or to decrease their suffering at least, because there was no medicine.
What about a native Hawaiian leader? Do you have one?
Native
Do you
Hawaiian.
know? Oh, it could be from the past too.
Well, God, it's Kamehameha is a Hawaiian leader, which is kind of a profound symbol for me because of the Big Island and how he led. And to lead in a powerful way and unite a people, I have to say, is extraordinary. He also is controversial, right? Because it was a warrior. So I guess that's very different than a person who sacrificed for the Hawaiian people, but he sacrificed in his own way.
Sure.
And
For his pono that he describes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And,
You know,
and going to Big Island and seeing where he was has always been extraordinary.
Walk in his footsteps.
Yes.
And speaking of walking in footsteps, I hope we'll be able to team up a little bit more in the future. I see that we've come to actually the end of our session, and I'm so sorry. I could talk to you for a long, a lot of questions to ask, but perhaps you can just give a few words out to our ohana that's going to be watching.
I would just say mahalo for welcoming me and my family, and for integrating me into our culture and society all these years. It is an honor to be a physician and a lieutenant governor here in Hawaii. It's the most extraordinary place, and the way I've seen our families come together through this crisis is something that I think people will reflect on for centuries. So I'm just personally grateful to have been a part of that, and to come through with my family, the Hawaiian community, and the whole state. I'm thankful for that.
Thank you. Mahalo to you,
Mahalo.
Dr. Green, for your service.
Bet.
And no laila, he pai ke ia iau koua pauloa. Well, e komo i nā hana like ole, no ke koho pono ana i ke ia makahiki. I invite you all to really get engaged in whatever part of the election process that there is for us, especially find out and get information, gain information, ask questions. Kalakaua writes in the end of Hawaiʻi Poni in the third verse, O kau hana nui e uie, your greatest task is to question, to ask. And Dr. Green here, Lieutenant Governor, you'll see him everywhere. You'll see him on a corner somewhere with his scrubs on. He's not, you don't have to worry about him running away from you. You have a question, you ask him, he'll answer your question. So, no laila, mahalo ya uko, and mahalo to you, Dr. Green, and thank you for joining all of us. Aloha nui.
Hey, aloha kako e nā hoa I komo I ka aha o CNHA o kia makahiki. O wano Amy Kalili a eia mai au ma anei me ke kahi kanaka hano a oia ke kahi o nā kanaka e holo moho ana a imi ana I ka lilo I ko Hawaiʻi kia aina o ke eia makahiki ae. Aloha kako, I'm Amy Kalili. Mahalo to all of you who are joining us for CNHA's convention this year. And I have the privilege of sitting here with another esteemed candidate seeking to be Hawaii's governor next year, Kirk Caldwell. Aloha kaua, Mayor.
Yeah.
Aloha kaua, Kirk. I'm going to try not to say Mayor. Aloha,
Yeah.
Kirk.
No,
Thank
aloha.
you so much.
It's really nice to be here, Amy. I appreciate the opportunity. I really appreciate just hearing you talk.
Thank you.
You're beautiful.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
so much
Yeah.
for joining us. And I
Yeah.
know that the intent is kind of for us to just spend some minutes with you to kind of get to know the person behind the public servant, if you will, knowing that you have basically been a public servant for nearly 20 years
Yeah,
now in
yeah.
various capacities. But okay, who else? You know, who else is
Yeah.
Kirk, if you will?
And I have to say, you know, I have high name recognition, but I feel people don't know who I really am as a person. They know more about me as a politician who made decisions and ran the problems, looked for solutions, but they don't know my background and my life story. And I hope we can talk about that
Absolutely.
today.
Well said. You know, I was thinking maybe let's start, if you will, with your younger or formative years.
Yeah.
You know, I know that you grew up in Waipahu as well as Hilo. And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to that, but maybe in particularly
when you reflect back on those years, were there any particular moments or experiences that you realize kind of shaped who you've become as a leader?
So, I mean, all of us, I think, are shaped by our communities, and I'm really proud of the fact that Waipahu helped shape who I am today, and Hilo, both of them. I was a little kid when I was in Waipahu, but just one short story. There's a flume by our house, went down into the middle, cold, cool water coming from Waiole Ditch, and we'd go swimming there. And of course, our parents were scared you'd get sucked down into the mill and ground up with the cane. And it seemed like every time I went in there, Amy, within minutes, my mom or other moms from the neighborhood would be over there yanking us out of the flume. And I always thought, how do they know we're here? And what I understood is the neighbors were watching, the community was watching for their keiki to protect us. And that made me feel protected and that people cared and were concerned. Hilo, another very small community, you're from there. I mean, people know about you. It's Coconut Wireless. If you're bad, they know. If you're good, they know.
Absolutely,
and,
absolutely.
Well, a short story there, when we were young and tsunamis would come, and it always seems like they came in the middle of the night, right? And the siren would go off. My dad would wake us all up. We'd wake up with the siren. And we actually would get in our station wagon and go down to Bayfront and help stoners take their products out of their stores, put it in our car, and drive back up to our house, which was outside of the inundation zone, until the all clear. And then we'd bring it back the next morning. Now, as a little kid, I was the eldest of 5 kids. We'd all be down there with our parents. I was a little bit scared, looking at Bayfront, thinking, oh man, is a tsunami coming? Look towards a power plant, because in '60, right, it hit there and big sparks and explosions. But I also saw people were down there in the middle of the night. The streets were full of people helping each other, going into what was somewhat of a dangerous situation, even though that you knew you had enough warning to get out, helping each other, and then bringing everything back the next day. Again, those are life lessons to me about community, about caring for each other, about helping, and about honor too. So these communities shape me in so many ways in terms of the people there and what they taught by their actions.
Well said. I have to agree, especially with those, the comments about some of those, again, those seminal experiences and just triggers and things. I think, for me, something that resonated was what you said about in these smaller communities, everybody kind of knows your business, good, bad, or otherwise. But it's again, it's like that natural malama mechanism, if you will, because it provides a safety net. At the time when you're young, you probably don't appreciate it. But when you grow up, you're like very, very appreciative of those experiences. Moving on, if you will, a little bit into your latter years, maybe into your professional career. If you could speak a little bit about that and maybe what it was that 20 some odd years ago, that particular experience, point in time that motivated your decision or kind of pushed you over the edge to enter into politics as a public servant, as an elected official. What was that?
It's kind of a life story almost. When I think back as a little kid in Hilo and watching the civil rights movement, Walter Cronkite, for younger folks, they don't know who that is, but we would see, the protests, and I felt really impacted by what was happening there in the South. But then later, when I went off to college, I got involved in things like the Vietnam War, the anti-war movement. I know I respect those who served, but I was strongly against the war and got involved in terms of shaping, I think, what became a change in how our country went towards that war. And it made me feel like, hey, I can make a difference in a small way, part of many hundreds of thousands of young people protesting. So when I came home, I was lucky enough to work for William S. Richardson, the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court, when I got out of law school. And he brought about a bloodless revolution. I mean, he took, he was trained in Western jurisprudence, Western law, but he took Hawaiian law, Native Hawaiian law, and he blended the two together. And he created a new version of law, whether it be kamaiana witnesses or, access to the beaches and all the shorelines held in trust, or water rights for those who are at the end of the water step of the stream, those who have lo'i and a growing kalo, and everywhere else in between. I mean, I saw this man, a gentle man. I mean, I never saw him talk stink. I never heard him swear, but he went and always looked to try to do the right thing. And clerking for him, working on some of these opinions for him, I looked at him as a transformational leader that I thought, and he was the lieutenant governor at one point, then chief justice, in the Kamehameha Schools, Bishop State trustee. And that really motivated me to stay involved in the process. And so I helped other candidates run for office. And all of them, I'd be a little disappointed. Sometimes they didn't do things I thought they should do. So I thought, I want to try it. And I'll see what it's like for me. And I love the process, from walking door to door as a representative of Manoa, sign waving, and then serving. I actually loved it. So it was reaffirming for me that I could do the job. But here's the thing, Amy, sometimes I was disappointed in myself too, that I didn't do enough, that I didn't fight hard enough, or I stepped back from something that looked too dangerous or something. And I realized these other people I supported, they are just like me, I'm like them, and so it's part of being a human being.
Absolutely.
But it also is reaffirming that, you know, this is something I wanted to keep doing. And of course, I ran for mayor twice, and I loved serving, helping people, making lives better, caring for the place I love more than anywhere else in the world, and that's Hawaii.
That's awesome. You know, I just recently learned as well about your clerkship for CJA, and that, you know, just hearing you speak about that, seeing people model behavior that, you know, you can hopefully one day emulate, and just the way that he, like you said, just was engaged in a system and yet brought forth some of the things that defined who he was and who his community was, and was able to weave that into the process. And then you just saying that, you know, your willingness to want to do the same and to engage. And if I can, I just want to jump in with another question. For all of these years of service, are there one or two things that kind of stick out in your mind that you hope maybe 10, 20 years from now, some local kid here in Hawaii will see what you did, the decisions you made, and potentially use that as a motivation for them to try to do some of the same?
I mean, there's probably a bunch of things that I think are examples of, for me, fighting hard for policy, even though there may be strong opposition to certain things, but it's for the good of the long-term future. You know, there could be small things, but the bike lane down King Street, highly unpopular with most people who drive cars. I did it because of our climate crisis. I did it for a healthier environment, to do our part. And there's more of them. Now, I hope they continue to be built in the future in our city and around our state as a way to travel other than by car. And highly unpopular, but I hope that maybe a generation from now we'll see a grid of bike lanes protected, lots of people riding like you see in Asia and Europe, and know these kind of actions, small at the time, can result in sea change over a long period of time if you pursue this course. Planting trees, you know, as mayor, we planted hundreds of thousands of trees, over 250, almost 300 in Ala Moana Beach Park alone. But when I drive around the city and I see these trees and I see them thriving, and I know that they're going to provide more shade, and they're going to clean our air, and they're going to help fight, again, our climate CO2 emissions. And as they continue to grow, future generations are going to benefit. Those are small ones. I mean, there's one other one, highly controversial, but even our rail project. There's a lot of reasons why people should be upset, obviously. But I was also someone who stood up for the project. I never blamed anyone else. I never said it was that person's fault. But I think it's a legacy project. When completed, and it'll probably be completed way after I'm fortunate enough maybe to be governor, that people are going to be riding this. There's going to be a kid in Waipahu, where I grew up, who's going to step on that train with his surfboard and tell him, Ma, I'm going to go surfing at Ala Moana Bowls. I'll be back in a couple hours. Get on the train with his board, because there's surf racks, go to Ala Moana, surf, and come home. And it's going to be second nature. They won't even think it's different or unusual. But that is a legacy that's going to give back. It's about transportation equity and social justice. It's about climate. It's about living closer together, but in a better way, and still preserve that sense of aloha and community and connection. So those are just some. I could go on and on and on,
I'm sure
but we
you
don't
can,
have enough time.
especially given, you know, all the years that you've served. And thank you for sharing that, you know, and throughout the conversation thus far, for opening up and, you know, kind of sharing what may be perceived as some of your vulnerabilities. Mahalo nui for sharing that. You know, one of the things I was thinking of while you're talking is obviously you have grown up here in Hawaii, keiki o ka'aina, if you will, have a sincere aloha for this place. And perhaps this question might be a little redundant of some things that you just mentioned, but given your familiarity with our place and obviously other places around the world, what is one thing perhaps that you think we know well or do very well in Hawaii that other places could take notes from and learn from us? And after that, I'm going to ask you the vice versa, that question. But what's something we do or know or embrace, embody very well that the world can learn from us here in Hawaii?
I think for me, it's aloha and kuleana.
Elaborate.
I think we would probably agree on that. I think there's nowhere else in the world where we really have this feeling and concern for each other, that we have this sense of responsibility that's not just about us, but about our neighbors, our community, our island, and our state. You know, I was lucky enough to go to school on the East Coast and graduate school on the East Coast, and I worked in D.C. twice, once for Dan Inouye as a senator, and the second time my wife was chair of the FDIC. So I've lived in other places. But the one thing that I know the other places don't have, that we have, is that concern for community, for caring, for helping up. It's why people went down the Bayfront in Hilo when a tsunami came. It's why people called when I was in the flume, going down to the mill, that people cared. You know, on the continent, it's not my problem, I don't care. It's just second nature. We care. We want to do something. We need to preserve that. We need to enhance it. I think it's the thing that makes us different than anywhere else in the world, not just our country, but the world.
Absolutely. The collective over the individual.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's flip that around. What do you think is one thing or a couple of things that we can learn from other places that perhaps could benefit or enhance our way of life here in Hawaii?
Yeah. For me, I think of this story. You know, Najo Yoshinaga was a senator from Maui, fought in the 442. Came back, was a lawyer for the ILWU, brought about a lot of change, and then ran for the legislature and was part of the revolution in 1954 when the legislature went Democrat. But he did incredible things. He did the Prepaid Health Care Act. He did that 1% for arts, and he did a lot of other things. This is a guy from the plantation, but he is a Renaissance guy. And I honored him when I was the majority leader on the floor of the House. And he was sitting in my office before I went downstairs. I said, Najo, you know, you're under your life. What would you do different? He said, I would dream bigger. I do think we in Hawaii are better than anywhere else. I talked about why we're better, but dreaming really big dreams and then working hard for them. I have an example, you know, Nainoa Thompson and his voyage around the world. Now that was a gigantic dream.
Absolutely.
You know, and he talks about it, it's maybe sometimes more dangerous not to go than to go, to leave the pier. By staying tethered to the pier, it's actually, I believe more of that should be happening. It doesn't mean you're on a voyage in a canoe around the world, but it's that we believe that we can attain incredible things as a people. And as governor, I want to enhance that. You know, when I'm campaigning, I talk about this pivot, but it's how do we support those younger than us to dream these incredibly big dreams and then go out and do them for our state, but also in other parts of the world. We're better than most other places. And the keiki of this place, absolutely, are as good or not better than others. And to dream those big dreams and go out and do them.
Absolutely. You know, mahalo your comment about Nainoa and about that notion of exploration. And I think, you know, there are numerous examples of that, I think, in Hawaii's mo'aukala, in our history, where the people of this place, the Kanaka Hawaii, would intentionally go out and seek new things and bring those home and make them a part of who we are and who this place is. And now that you know, my wheels are turning and I'm thinking exactly about that, who, if you have an example of an individual from Hawaiian history, if you will, that you associate with, appreciate, maybe sometimes reference, who might that be and why?
I always say my favorite monarch was Queen Emma.
Why is that?
A couple of reasons. One, I mean, I think more, even, I don't know, I could be stepping out of my swim lane, but I think she had more to do with Queen's Hospital Foundation being founded than her husband. It was her child who died, Prince Lot. Her father was a doctor. And yet, you know, her son didn't get the care he needed, and her people were dying. I think she felt this, I just think she felt it so strongly in here that she, with her husband, one, raised the money and started this legacy hospital. We all go there today. It's an incredible gift to the people of Hawaii. So I love that about her. But she also, you know, was not afraid to stand up and fight with the death of her husband. lands that she thought were hers were going to be taken away, and she exercised her dower rights, which is a Western concept. She went to the Supreme Court of the Kingdom of Hawaii, won. Those lands are the lands in Waikiki, all this rent from these hotels, and where is it going? To the Queen's Hustle. She stood up and fought for what she thought was hers.
Right.
And look at the legacy she gives. And then she ran to be queen and lost, but some people think she actually won. And there was rioting in the streets, and she said, stop, stop, don't be violent. Now, that takes someone with great emotional maturity and courage, even though she wanted to be the queen. And I think she should have been the queen, my personal opinion.
Right.
But she was willing to do it for a greater good. That's a great leader in my mind. So I love Queen Emma a lot. I also think, I mean, we're here at Council of Native Hawaiian Advancement, but you think about Prince Kohio in Congress. I mean, today we can't get major legislation passed. And yet here's a man, a brown man in a Congress that's all white. He had no vote, yet he got legislation passed with 0 votes by the members of the Congress, a white Congress. And how did he do it? I mean, I find we've tried other things since then and can't get them passed. And yet he did this. Now, I think he did it through just his shrewdness, through his personality in Congress itself, entertaining, talking, lobbying. But he also brought people from Congress to Hawaii and showed them what Hawaii was about. By the way, in a period, the 1920s, difficult period of time for Native Hawaiians in Hawaii. And yet he did this. Now, I'm also biased because he and Prince Kwananakoa created the county system because he wanted to give a voice to his people, because think the governor that those days was appointed by the president. And he created the city and county of Honolulu, which I'm the 14th mayor, but the first mayor was Native Hawaiian. The second mayor was Native Hawaiian. Both of them sided with the royalty and in the counter-revolution, but he wanted to give his people voice, and the people got their voice. And here's the most beautiful thing, the Royal Hawaiian Band, which really was the band of the kingdom, and after the overthrow and the republic and then a territory, they didn't want anything royal. So the band really wasn't attached to any government system. The first mayor of the city and county of Honolulu said, we want the Royal Hawaiian Band. Its home is with us. That band still plays at the city and county of Honolulu, and that voice is heard by the music that they play, that they played back then and they played today. I mean, it's a beautiful, so he's the other transformational leader, I think.
Amazing. Thank you for, for sharing that, the insight that you bring forth, but that you draw from that, just knowing and being able to recount those points in time, those amazing, those figures and heroes of our history, which is so important. I mean, I think you hit it on the head, and especially for us, for the Lahui in particular, the importance of determining our future by being able to look back at the past and bring up experiences such. I'm going to pivot a little bit, if you will, and just get back into something that might be a little more personal about Kirk Caldwell. In 3 words, how would you describe yourself on your best day?
Success, action, caring.
Beautiful. Success, action, and caring. Okay, on the flip side of that, what 3 words would you use to describe yourself on your worst day? I'm going to follow up and ask you why you chose these words, but go ahead.
Not getting things done. That's actually 4 words.
That's 4 words, but it's okay. I'll give you a bonus word. Elaborate a little bit about that.
Whether it's on a personal level or on a professional level, I want to do things and I want to make a difference. And I think, by the way, that's not unique. Most of us are that way. And so when I feel, if it's on a weekend and I don't go out for a run, or I don't do things around the house to make things better, I feel like, I'm slacking off. I'm kind of lazy. Now, sometimes I know I need to rest. But it's that making things better. Now, as a public servant, whether it be in the House or as mayor, it is about doing the big and small things to make life better for the people I represent, which really are the people I care about and love anyway. It's part of that aloha and kuleana I talk about. And when I'm getting those things done, I feel so alive. I mean, I feel so excited, and I want to do more. I want to work harder. I don't know that. I
No,
hope you can relate to that.
absolutely.
I'm sure you feel the same way on
Absolutely,
your
and
things.
as you're talking more and explaining a little bit more about it, it's almost, even if it was your worst day, your perspective on it and the way that you look at it is almost a good thing, you know, in that I think I'm hearing that it kind of motivates you, that you acknowledge it, that it probably wasn't your best day, and it becomes this motivation that the next one may very well be that a great day for you.
You know, it's a small thing. Just I drive by Thomas Square every day on the way home because I'm renting office space downtown. I go down King Street and then go left on Punahou to Manoa. And Thomas Square, every time I drive by, I sit a little straighter because we work so hard to take that park and tell the story of Hawaii and the restoration of the monarchy. Even the native Hawaiian saying is no more, the life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. Is we are righteous because we are the people. The Hawaiian flag that flies 24/7 with the light on it, the statue of Kamehameha III and all the things that he did. I feel so, it's a small thing, but it's a big thing. It's a legacy. So every year with the Restoration Day, there's luau now and people gather and there's more stories to be told. And little kids who walk by say, who's that man? And the story is told over and over every year. Forever, hopefully. So that's just one about getting something done and sense of accomplishment.
Sense of accomplishment. So all of that being said, it seems like I'm thinking like, wow, man, you can be kind of hard on yourself here sometimes. So here's a question: what do you do, or where do you go to just relax, unwind, and recharge?
So if you ask my wife that, she say he's out in the yard.
Really?
So if I have a day with nothing planned, I'll go out in the yard. I'll stay out there all day. And work, and I love it. I mean, from easy stuff, cutting the grass, to building a fish pond, planting trees, little and big things. I love putting my hands into the soil. I love feeling the wind and the sun, and I like the rain of Manoa. There's so many different kinds that blow on, and you're in touch with your environment. I come alive with that, and I feel creative. I'm out there doing things. No one's telling me, hey, do this, do that. It's my idea. Sometimes it's junk, and I'll go redo it. But I get to be creative, and so
you and your Aina.
that is something I love. I love surfing, too. But as mayor, it got harder because I'd be out there, and the guys are, hey, mayor, huh? How come I don't have a green bin? I want another great bin. Pothole on Keamoko, how come you haven't filled it? It's like, oh man. But I loved going. I still love it. I love being in the water, and I'm not a great surfer. South Shore, small waves.
Do either of those things, a love and appreciation for being outdoors, whether it's, in your yard, doing things, planting and so on and so forth, or being in the water, do those come from or harken back to your younger years and things that you used to do, whether it was here in Waipahu or on Hawaiʻi Island in Hilo?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think I liked being in the flume in Waipahu. If my parents are alive, where is Kirk? And I'm the oldest of 5. We're in Wailuku River. We live by the river. We're down there all the time, swimming all over the place, having guava wars, catching prawns, jumping off the cliffs, lying on the boulders when they're warm, right? You go in the water, it's soap. The water, you come out, you feel like you took a bath almost with soap, but it's cleansing. And then you lie down on one of those big black rocks and warm, and I loved it.
It's like a warm
I'm thinking
hug.
about it right now. Like a warm hug from Mother Nature. So,
love it. I love it. Okay, here's the last and probably the most important question of our time together today. What is your go-to plate lunch order?
Zippy's chili. I just went there before now. Went down there.
Top of mind.
White rice, may not be that. White rice and chili with beans.
Love it.
I love it. And I can eat it every day of the week. I mean, I never get tired of it.
Simple pleasures.
Simple pleasures.
Simple pleasures. I want to just mahalo nui ho yaoi for not just for being here, but being willing to, again, kind of lift the veil a little bit and share with us about just who you are and some things that shaped you over time. Is there anything else that you feel a burning desire or that you'd really like to share with, not only those who are engaging in the CNHA convention, but arguably our kaiaulu or our community? Anything else that you'd like to share about this more personal side of our former mayor, Kirk Cardwell?
Well, I guess one other thing, I talked about transformative leaders and others that affected my life, but I did want to say my wife, Donna Tonoi, who I've been married to for 40 years, has passed August is someone, I talked about dreaming bigger. This is a Japanese-American woman. Her family owned a saimin stand. She was a very quiet and shy woman when she got out of law school. And she went on to have some big dreams. She was the bank commissioner of the state of Hawaii during the S&L crisis. She was chair of the FDIC. And she was an example to me, too. At that point, I was Mr. Tanoi in some ways. And, but I was just blown away by, she'd had some very big dreams, and you could fail, right, in a public way. But the other thing, so she dreamed big, but I also saw her work really hard. You know, she did the homework to actually make sure her dream became a success, which taught me, you can dream big, but the other thing you got to do, you got to work really, really, really hard to actually succeed in it. And I got to sleep next to her, to eat with her, to raise a daughter together, to see how she did those things. And she is also a role model to me.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. Mahalo ya'oi, Donna, for supporting this wonderful human here. Ano leila, mahalo ho ya'oi, Kirk. Ya'o ko ke kahi e na hoa e komo ana I ke ya'aha he mauhana ko'i ho'ona'o wau a le'a hou aku. Mahalo ho ke ia launa ana.